Welcome to the podcast that explores what virtual assistants want business owners to know when they start asking themselves the question, hey, do I need a VA? I'm Rachael, and after 18 years as a virtual assistant going it alone, I experienced the steep learning curve from the other side of the VA client relationship when I hired my own VA. Joining me on this podcast is a group of friends and colleagues who all have their own take on what busy entrepreneurs need to know to find, hire, and work with a virtual assistant, and mindfully answer the question, hey, do I need a VA? Let's get this episode started. Hello, and welcome back to a brand new season of Hey, Do I Need a VA? The podcast. With me always is Bree BV, Leanna Rimley, and Quinn Hubbard. Quinn, you want to say something quick?
You might recognize my voice or my face, and that's because in previous seasons I went by Sydney, and now I'm going by Quinn.
New name, same great person.
Yeah.
Yay! All right, today's episode came about because when my lovely castmates were reading the beta version of my book, Bree mentioned quite a few times, this is not how it's done in Canada. Those were not her exact words. She said it much more eloquently and nicely, but it made me aware of where my bias might be when it comes to legal, financial, and culture things that are different between the US and other countries. Today, we're going to kind of talk about those that are specific to the US, Canada, but where it makes sense, we will also bring in the Philippines and other countries where we have knowledge. But these are things that we want you, our readers, to know that may create deal breakers, maybe interview questions that you need to ask, maybe topics to consider that you might not have considered before. So today's topic is Canada versus US, but not in like a competitive nature, more of I want to lovingly know the difference between my culture and your culture where it makes sense in the VA client relationship. So let's get started. One of the things that kept coming up was in the US, I always say that we are 1099 subcontractors. Bree lovingly pointed out that if you work with a Canadian VA, you don't have to send them a 1099. And when I was asking my accountant about my team members in the Philippines, he said, I don't need to send them a 1099 either. But because Quinn is here stateside with me, I did have to send them a 1099 form. So, Bree, what are some of those financial things that are different, not just the 1099, but maybe go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit more of a background on what I found out when I started working with American clients and why I found out that I didn't need to have a 1099 is that the difference is because I own my business in Canada and I'm operating from my home in Canada, I'm not considered a US subcontractor. If I was to travel and come work with you whenever I am working with you at your place of residence or wherever you're working from in the States, that falls into a different category if I'm always working with you in person or down in the States. So it depends on where I'm providing the work from is how I had it explained to me or how I understood it. So if I am not in the States doing my work and my business is located here, I don't have to have the 1099. But if I was to go work in the States, even if I was to come for like working a conference or something like that, my understanding is then if I was working for a US client, there's something called a W-8 that you would have to get completed to say that I did do some work for you there and kind of, I'm not exactly sure what all it is. I just know that that was something that was also put in there. So something to be aware of just for asking your accountant about these things or questions that you might want to consider if you're having people come down and support you. The other thing that would be considered is like for me, I did start out with charging my American clients in Canadian dollars. And for what I got as feedback is that they actually prefer to be charged in US dollars because it was an accounting nightmare. Their accountants didn't like having to convert it to Canadian. And then if I'm charging Canadian, I have to charge GST, which then is a tax thing that you have to figure out if you want to apply to get it refunded or like do all that kind of stuff if you want to worry about taxes and things. If I charge in US dollars, I don't have to do that. So considering if you want them to charge you in what currency and if they're open to doing that with you, or if they only charge in Canadian dollars and charge tax is also something that you want to consider for just that accounting stuff. And if it's too much of a barrier or not, are some of the things that I've come across.
So, like, I pay Rusty, my VA in the Philippines. I use a program called Wise, which I put in the US dollars and then it converts to the currency that he gets paid out in. Do you use something like that, or do you just invoice and then they pay you however?
I invoice through Stripe. So I just put it in Stripe and put it in US dollars, and then they can choose how they want to do it, if they want to do it with a credit card or connect their bank or do anything like that. Something is to consider though is I do have one client who their credit card doesn't like them trying to pay because I am in Canada. There's something kind of thing. So whenever they go to pay me, they have to physically call the bank and say it's okay for this transaction to go through. I'm not sure if that's how their account is set up or what that situation is, but I do know that I have one client who does have to do an extra step to send us funds and be able to pay us. But for the most part, I have like my clients are probably about 50-50 American and Canadian. And so that's the only one client that I have that has any issues or anything like that. Everybody else has been fine.
And Quinn, you guys got questions?
So, Bree, I know some of my clients work with other clients in Europe and things like that, and they've had to do other forms and things. Are there forms that have to be filled out to go back and forth between the U.S. and Canada? As far
I
as
don't have to do any forms. No, I've called, but like I've talked to people on both sides. Like I just file it. Like I don't have to do forms for my contractors here. I do what we call a T 4A, which is like a subcontractor. Maybe that's the same as your 1099. So I just give them that. But for like client wise and stuff, I've talked to accountants on your side. I've talked to the CRA and stuff on our side. And as long as we're tracking it and reporting it, then there's a little bit of a nuance. If you're a Canadian VA, you do have to record your US dollar amount that you come in a little bit differently because of accounting and how we're not charging tax. They need to know why you're not paying GST on that. So there's a little something that the accountants put in to make them aware of that. But other than that, like I don't have a whole bunch of extra forms. There's just a couple nuances and that my accountant does.
Are there any other communication, work style differences between the US and Canada that you've kind of encountered?
Not really, like not as much. Like it's about the same as it is if I'm working with somebody. It's mainly the time zones, right? Is like how much time ahead or behind are they? I think I have two clients that are in the same time zone. And so it's like, just like figuring out what the times are, and that's the same if it's Canada or if it's the States. But that's basically the biggest thing is just remembering what time zone we're all in. So, but communication wise and stuff like that, there is like a few things like spelling wise, like we have a lot extra U's in a lot of words. So like just remembering to do those nuances for captions or media and things like that, just remembering some of those nuances in language, those come up. And, on both sides, right? The Canadians want them in there and the Americans don't. So just kind of like a few little things like that, but nothing, oh my God, be sure you're aware of this kind of thing.
Is there anything that's come up where if a business owner is starting the process of thinking about hiring a VA, working with someone that would encourage or discourage them from crossing borders?
For me, in my experience, like it's not a deterrent on my side. I can't speak for VAs, I think, as a general rule, but from what people that I've worked with or encountered as virtual assistants here, we work usually with a mix of both. I have some friends of mine that actually do mostly American clients for whatever reason that they choose. But I don't feel like there's like pluses or minus necessarily. I think it's more about the fit. like how when you do your referral service and things like that, right? Like that's the biggest and most important part is like, how do they communicate? What are they specializing in? What are the offers and the services that they do? And does that fit for what you're looking for? What level of service are you looking for? How much do you need? And what's your budget? I think those are more important than whether they're from Canada and or the United States. I feel like if you're going overseas, that conversation might look a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think, based on what you're sharing, it's still about the fit. It's finding the right VA, because whether the forms match or right, you still are going to talk to your accountant and your tax professional where you are to find out what you need to do for your business. And the VA is hopefully going to do the same thing on their end, so that the two talk to each other. I don't feel that I've had any real issues with working with my team in the Philippines. Nothing really different than working with Quinn here. So for me, it was about the fit. Who's going to do the best job for the projects that I have? And so I'm glad to hear that it's the same regardless of where the VA is that you're working with, because at the end of the day, the VA is also a business owner who should know how to work with different clients across borders if they choose to take on those clients. And if you're the first, you guys get to learn together. All right. Well, we hope this episode was helpful. If you have any questions about anything we discussed today, please send us an email at heyvapodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the link in our description notes to our link tree to reach out to any one of us if you have something specific about anything. So if you liked this episode, please give it a like and a share or a review. I am learning that reviews are very important, and so we're going to start asking for them. So if you liked it, please let us know. Take care. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hey, Do I Need a VA? The podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a like, comment, or review, and feel free to join our Facebook group, Find, Hire, and Work with a VA, for more tips and tools. If you have any questions, please email them to heyvapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. We'll see you next time.